Now moving on to the next panel, which is the industry challenges panel. We already had our first panel with the corporates talking about the challenges that we're discussing, and Chris is going to go as our moderator and our VP of Business Development into that discussion. So let me quickly just go through some of the bios here of the attendees of this session. So we have Pat Martin from Estes Express Lines. He joined Estes in 2001. In 2012, Pat was promoted to Corporate Vice President of Sales, where he oversees revenue growth management for the LTL division and the coordination of sales strategies company-wide. Pat is an advisor and board member of several companies and is also an angel investor focusing on software companies selling to shippers, carriers, and 3PLs. We know him very well. He's an advisor to us and has helped us tremendously. So we appreciate you for being a part of this panel. We also have Dan White of Coca-Cola. Dan White is a senior vice president and president of new revenue streams for Coca-Cola. Dan was recently appointed to this role from working directly for the chief operating officer on defining the new growth platforms globally for the company. Prior to this, he held senior roles leading the North American sparkling business, working as the global CMO for the McDonald's business line. Next, we have Rob Sutton from BNSF Logistics. He's an executive vice president of innovation, where he leads the strategic direction of research and development, corporate strategy, and the Office of Project Management. Before stepping into this role, he led the U.S. and international project and rail services as senior vice president. He's also near and dear to us, and we work closely with them as well. And finally, we have Michael Ahmed of COO of Gorilla Glue, who has joined us. And prior to that, he was the business, I believe, head of digital innovation for Tyson Foods, where we actually met him for the first time a few years ago. Thank you all for being a part of the panel, and I'll hand it off to Chris Lee to lead this session.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for joining with us, members of the panel. Really appreciate it. Most of you I've met before and looking forward to this. Today's main topic for this panel is really focused on the adoption of logistics technology. We all know it's a big moving thing out there that we all got to get our hands around, but how do you deploy it? How do you get it to actually return a value for you? So I'll start with the first question with Pat. Pat, how do you prioritize which technologies your organization chooses to actually look at and adopt? So we know, there's a big universe of a bunch of stuff out there. You're going to funnel through it and end up with just a few, but how do you start that process?
You first started, Chris, by unmuting. I think is the best way to get that started.
That's a new cutting edge technology. I understand you might be a little behind on it, but that's okay.
Yeah, at Estes, we're an LTL asset-based trucking company. So labor, is our single largest cost. As you can imagine, the lion's share of our workers are drivers and dock workers. So our goal is to automate, the processes that help these guys do their jobs better. So we're working hard on things, that help us create more capacity, like line haul optimization or technologies to help us process freight better and be more efficient, picking up and delivering freight. We're also working hard to give our customers better visibility into our network and more self-service options and tools for them to engage us and allow us to push really more relevant information to them faster. So it's a lot about data and really understanding what data makes good sense to help us become more efficient. For us, our biggest challenge is capacity. So, most of our efforts around automation are just to give us better visibility into what's happening, across our network.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask the same question of Dan and Rob, because this is pretty pertinent to the whole focus we've got today. So Dan, would you mind attacking that one as well?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. I think just a moment to reflect back on the couple of prior conversations. I think I'm a shipper, I guess, by definition of this of the panel. And so, what I'd say is, I love being on these panels because my day job at Coke leads me to a lot of industry events and a lot of people inside that industry speaking of the industry I belong to, the beverage business. But what I love about this is I get to see another industry talk to itself. And to see how it talks to itself. And what I'd say is that this industry is really it's critical to us, and it is one that's costing us a lot of money. And so in the needs based, as I listen to the VC companies and I listen to the rest of the folks talking about it, is that it's terribly inefficient, and the inefficiency is really coming. I think Dean Waller had a really nice way of looking at it, to say it's holistic. It's not about fragmentation. Fragmentation is a choice, because the fragmentation is, I'm going to try and solve the thing that I think I can make the most money on and hope someone buys it. The holistic point of view is looking at it and saying that that's not going to work holistically. And if you're in a big corporation like Coke, then there is no fragmentation, because somebody sits there and stitches it all together, and that's what gets efficient. And so the warehousing piece is different than the logistics piece, which is different than my incoming freight from offshore, and I have to stitch that together, or someone from my team.
Got it. Thank you so much. Rob, can you give us some insight as well?
And so I just think that.
I'm sorry, Mike, you or Dan, you locked up for a second, so I apologize. I spoke over you there.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's so the fragmentation piece is a choice, and I think for us to evaluate, we're looking for more holistic solutions. I think it's a great turn that the dean put up there, is that a number of times we talk about fragmentation. We're going to be looking for holistic solutions that stitch these things together, and the faster the industry can do that, I think the better off we can be.
Fantastic. Rob, want to give us some insight?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of, we're intermediary, in terms of where our place is in the supply chain. Similar though to Pat, in terms of, like, if you look at our big cost drivers in our businesses is labor, and really looking at how we can drive efficiencies in that. So a lot of our plan and looking at how we can source supply chain technology really revolves around how we can drive efficiency in that, and really to create either through RPA or process automation, some of the things that you say are more rudimentary, or or things that need to be done but don't add a lot of value to our clients, and really to have our focus and for our people to be much more focused on what's really driving and adding value to our clients from that perspective. And then I think the other thing, it's been probably more so, I joined a little bit late to the overall call, but I think what I've heard a little bit in terms of this is the aspect of how do we do better, touching like on what Dan was saying about the fragmentation, is that the biggest challenge it feels like in this industry is really, knowing and having visibility to things to be able to match the best load with the best, with the best carrier to do that load, because we all have our own periscopes into that, and it's very limited in that. And so I think in terms of like how you leverage AI and machine learning and other tools to help do that better for you, I think that's the other thing that we really, as a as a company, are focused on, to see how we can find things that really help us in that regard.
Outstanding. I appreciate that very much. Mike, I'm going to present the next question for you, sir. What are some of the considerations for rolling out a new technology? And by that, I mean, in terms of deploying that actual technology, and what kind of strategies do you use to get buy-in, if you will, from your colleagues and then the executive team? Because we all know technology often is only as good as the actual adoption of it. So if you could address that for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I would say we look at a couple of different things when we are looking to roll out new technologies. The first thing is, do we have the right people, resources, and partnerships to help us achieve, the goals that we're looking for? Because without having the right infrastructure in place, it's going to fail at the very start. So making sure that we have the right structure in place to be able to support these new technologies. The second thing is, are we going to get the ROI on the investment that aligns with our strategic goals? And so the third thing is, how do we ensure that the new technology that we're going to roll out is going to get adoption so that we know that we're going to receive the value that's intended in the project? So those are kind of the three things that we look at when it comes to rolling out new technology. But as far as getting buy-in from key stakeholders across the organization, the first thing I look at is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And how does that fit within our strategic objectives, that as a corporation, how does that align with our strategic objectives? And the second thing we look at is we identify the value that new technology is going to bring to the company. And we work to get buy-in from critical stakeholders. So those are really the three key things that we kind of do as an organization. Does it align with our strategic direction? What's the value that it's going to bring? And then ultimately getting buy-in from the stakeholders or the organization.
Great, thank you. Rob, I'm going to bounce that one off of you as well, sir.
Well, I was just going to, feel like I'm a bobblehead, just say yes and agree with Michael in terms of that. But I would say certainly I think it starts in terms of, does it align with strategy, right? And where we're trying to go. We get, especially in the new role I've had in the last 6-9 months, you get a lot of things that are thrown at you. And what I've learned is that it's as important to say no as it is to say yes to things, and really understand like how it fits and what's the strategic value. And I think, Michael already alluded to, you really got to look at the value creation. What's the ROI in terms of looking at that? And then the other thing, and he mentioned resources was critical too. I think the other for us is also, ease of implementation. So, how important is it? What's the return of it? And how fast could we get something implemented to get real value back into the organization as quickly as possible?
Gotcha. Just real quick before I move on, Pat and Rob, if you guys have anything to add to that. And again, this is more so after that decision has been made, like on your prior question. Now it's getting it to take root and be actionable. Anything any nuggets you want to add into that before we move on?
Yeah, Chris, I would say, in this day and age, it's really important to move fast. Things change so quick in this industry. I think you really need to evaluate whether or not something is nice to have versus must have. And I would also say that minimum viable product is usually the winner over time with iteration, right? So whatever you're doing, you've got to move the needle today. So you got to, I think there's a theme I've heard that I totally agree in is, you got to make sure that what you're rolling out truly solves a problem that's actually worth solving. So I would say, where I've seen a ton of success in the transportation space is those that can roll out quality product in a short amount of time, minimum viable product, and make it better over time. But that constant iteration of technology, all moving towards what everybody else has said. And that is, what are your end goals? What's your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish and by when? Does that technology really enable you, or does it get in your way? Because I've seen a lot of technologies that are in the way versus
Sure.
actually automating things.
Sure. And it was addressed a little bit earlier about the new co-opetition that's out there, because in the transportation, we really used to work in silos in the past, and it was either build our own or protect all our information. Dan, what do you think has been one of the key things that's led to the shift to more collaborative partnerships with shippers, brokers, and carriers? Is it a need from one of those verticals in particular, or what do you think's kind of led to finally the gates being open for a lot of this collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's related to what the panelists so far have been talking about, which is it's just a lot easier to use, right? And the interfaces have become so much easier to use. I mean, I sometimes I've never been in the business before on ZUUM or their platform today, and so this notion that the cost of technology has dropped so much, or cloud-based technology has dropped so much that you can experiment a lot faster, and then ultimately with all the options that are out there, really the shipper is the biggest issue I would say is, facing me is that the shipper is being required to take the fragmented solutions today and stitch their own solution together, which, that's the number one place I think that we can provide seamlessly, because there's great solutions out there in the different, if in the different verticals. I'd say that today's day, that in the digital space for Coke, people used to talk in a foreign language to everybody else, and part of it was to be so special that nobody could possibly understand, so everybody would
Yeah.
get paid. And the logistics and supply chain group was, that would speak in a foreign language, and that language really is common language because of the ease of use of the interfaces. And so I think the easier and more connected the interfaces are going to be, the better the solutions we'll get for everyone.
Sure. Fantastic. All right, we're going to take a few audience questions here real quick. I'm going to look over another screen, excuse me, to get those questions, guys. This is for all of you folks, because we addressed it from one aspect before, but what have been some of the problems with adoption in the past? Again, because I just know from past history, that has been it could be the greatest technology in the world, but if you can't get your people to use it or whatever, it's kind of worthless. It's like knowledge. If it doesn't spread without your company, it's worthless. So we know some of the things that we're trying to do to get it in there, but what have been some of the roadblocks in the past that any of you have had, or speed bumps?
Chris, I would say, this one's about as simple as it gets. If the technology makes the user's life easier and adds value, they'll adopt it. If it makes their job harder, then adoption is going to be really, really hard. So that one is hugely critical. We've seen that in like with just CRM. Is CRM helpful? If executed well, yes. If executed poorly and it's just a good tool for management, it's a nightmare to get adoption.
Yeah, I would agree, Chris. Yeah, I would agree with that, Chris. The end user experience is really critical. If it's overly complicated, they're just going to go around the system and keep doing it their old ways, right? So, and then the other piece I would just add to that, and I think it was mentioned earlier as well, is the integration piece. How well can, whatever that tech is, integrate with our existing systems as well?
Fantastic. All right, one last to close it up, then I'll kind of summarize some of them together. So we've all been going through COVID, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. What are some of the carryover? So we know some of the things will go back to normal as soon as we can, but what are some of the positive and negative carryover, the way we're going to be doing business 2022 and beyond? Rob, you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Matt hit on this a little bit, right? Is that I think the carryover from a positive standpoint is that we recognize clearly as a supply chain that we're much more integrated than we ever thought, right? In terms of the impacts and shocks that happen in the supply chain and how long that tail may be before we work that all out. But I think in terms of the digitization aspect of what Matt said, I think that's certainly something that's here to stay. In terms of like what goes away, I'm not so sure that I have real clear picture on that. Maybe other panelists may have a better perspective on that, but I think certainly this acceleration of looking at how we digitize and then the collaborative effort that we were just talking about, I think are things and themes that will continue to carry us on into the next several years.
Let me get a little more specific on one aspect of it. What about workforce management? Because we've heard some people say, you know what, I'm not going to bring everybody back in again, or I'm going to rotate because we found this synergy or lack of synergy. And the other folks that we spoke earlier about, or one of the earlier panels, like, I got to get out in front of people again, right? And that's how we do business. Any of you guys have any insights, pros and cons of that, where we're going?
Chris, I would say that buying has changed considerably. So a lot of that will stick. And then I would also say that, every company right now is wrestling with when and if they're going to bring people back to work. And a lot of the studies that I've seen, and I was on a supply chain leaders conference this morning, that was one of the topics. Close to 60% of the people that are out, working from home now in the surveys that are being done, that's a big number. They want to stay at home, you know, and so we're going to see just a massive shift in my mind of how people work in the future. I think everybody's going to wrestle with it. And I think I don't think there'll be one common way people do things. I think it'll just be, can you run your company from a more mobile platform? Like I'm more efficient today than I was when I was in an office. I think about going back to the office. Office is a place where the only thing that I'll really miss are those, hallway conversations that you have that you may not have otherwise. But as far as being efficient and working on the things that move the needle, I'm way more efficient, from the road or, from my house than I am, getting into, there tends to be a lot more meetings if you're in a corporate environment. And, hopefully that'll change too, hopefully we'll realize that there's not a big a need to sit around and meet all day. So, but I think it's a big shift that everybody's going to be thinking about.
I think you're right in one aspect. The fewer big formal meetings is a positive, but losing those water cooler hallway conversations can tend to be a big negative in some aspects too, because it's kind of like the old customer service issue. The worst complaint is the one you never heard about, or the best advice that is lost because you didn't have that off the cuff kind of conversation. Dan, would you like to chime in on that at all?
Yeah, I think it's great with the COVID has it's sort of a task orientation economy. Everybody can do their own thing, really efficiently. What I think it took away was collaboration. So everyone's doing their own thing, but it's really hard to collaborate and solve problems together over Zoom calls. It really does takes a whiteboard, or it takes to kind of at least be in the same physical space and the riff of solving solutions. I think solving problems is really key. And then I think what doesn't go away is the digitization piece. This is here, it's been accelerated, and there's a lot of catching up to do. And people in the middle between businesses and consumers are going to have to find new ways to work and solve problems and make money. We see it, today, a lot of the businesses, security and data breach, which every company is facing, and it's really started to affect pieces and parts of our supply chain, not only on the consumer data side, but just on the supply chain and security side of it. I know we're struggling with that even as of today on a certain issue. So, yeah, I think those are big things.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and the great experience you shared with us today. We really appreciate it. And that's how.
Hey, Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to just throw something out there.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I agree with Dan and his earlier statement that, we're all trying to stitch it together. And if the panel is open to it, right, I don't think one organization can solve it. And we all own different parts of the supply chain. And so the panel is open to it, maybe we can collaborate, host this and get together to figure out how do we solve this, right? Either for our own organizations or for the industry. And maybe, put a concept together that can help drive this holistic solution, like Dan, like you had mentioned earlier. So I'm open to it. And if the panel is too, maybe Chris, you can help coordinate, getting the panels together so we can start talking about it.
Consider it done. We'll be reaching out.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
All right, Matt?
Probably the most well-moderated session I've ever been in. So thanks, Chris, for having us. It was amazing.
Thank you. It was that cue to turn your mute off. I think that's what set the tone for the whole panel. Thank you.
You guys have a great day.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Chris. Great job. And just to piggyback off of what we heard here today, I think one of the key things that we're ultimately striving for here at ZUUM is bringing everybody together, collaborating. And the only way we're going to do this is if the likes of Michael Ahmed, Dan White, and the other folks that were on the panel can come together, Rob Sutton and the folks, we can all get together and start skinning this cat together and bringing and defragmenting. The other thing that was interesting about this panel, of course, is we heard a common theme I feel this industry has kind of two different flavors if you want to look at it. There's either low tech, no tech solutions out there with a lot of shippers, brokers, carriers, or there's legacy tech that's super convoluted that may have heavy implementation costs. And so it makes it really hard when you're actually going to look to bring on a solution to want to sign up for that if it's going to take you 5, 10 years. And of course, if it's not agile, if it's not updating with all the dynamic things that are happening in our world today, what value is it going to bring you 5 years from now when things have changed and you're stuck with your previous solution? So very exciting panel. Thank you all again for being a part of it.